Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. India has test-fired the Agni-V missile. It was successful and it was not hidden from the world. Unlike China's test, a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile that missed the target and was kept under wraps. In fact, China still denies the test. America, though, confirms it. They call it a Sputnik moment. It's a worry for the US, more so for India. A, because of India's proximity to China, and B, because of the continuing border standoff. So India's test comes at a very significant time. It's a nuclear-capable missile with a range of 5,000 kilometers. It can strike any part of China. India maintains it is purely a deterrent. And Delhi remains committed to its no first-use policy. Tonight on Gravitas, we compare India's missile capability with that of China. We discuss the Himalayan arms race and how these weapons impact the India-China equation. Also on the show, China is setting up another military base in Tajikistan. We'll tell you how this is a direct challenge to Russia, a battle for influence in Central Asia. Iran is returning to the nuclear deal talks. Why is this significant? What will the hardline President Raisi demand? And how does it impact India? We'll discuss all of that. In the run-up to the COP26 summit, India rejects net zero emission targets. We'll tell you how the West is unfairly using this stick to beat up others without cleaning up its act. And Saudi Arabia has decided to give $4.2 billion in aid to Pakistan. Imran Khan's joy is short-lived, though. TLP protesters are running riot in his country. We'll bring you the latest. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses the 18th ASEAN-India Summit through video conferencing and says that mutual cooperation will strengthen ties during the pandemic. Prime Minister Modi says the unity and centrality of ASEAN has always been a priority for India. Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen confirms that a small number of US forces are present on the self-governing island to train with Taiwanese soldiers. The confirmation comes as China has been increasing military pressure on Taiwan. Beijing says it firmly opposes military contact between the US and Taiwan. Sudan's military sacks 6 ambassadors while security forces continue their crackdown on pro-democracy protesters. The list of sacked envoys includes Sudan's ambassadors to the US, EU, China, France, and more. The United Kingdom condemns France's seizure of a British fishing boat in French waters. London warns Paris against further retaliation. All this in the backdrop of a row over post-Brexit fishing rights. Russia says that Turkey's decision to sell strike drones to Ukraine risked destabilizing the situation in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine has bought sophisticated Turkish drones to boost its military might. These drones are to be produced at a factory close to Kyiv. Inflation is skyrocketing in China. The average wholesale price of vegetables in the capital has jumped by 40% since last month, while some leafy vegetables rose more than 50%. Moscow enforces its strictest COVID-19 lockdown in more than a year in the face of record COVID cases and related deaths. In the partial lockdown, only essential shops like pharmacies and supermarkets will remain open. Schools will be shut down. World leaders are arriving in Rome for the G20 summit, with the key areas of focus to include climate change. A downpour in southern Italy has flooded roads, blocking cars and trapping people in their homes. The locals say leaders have not done anything apart from holding summits. Ronald Koeman has been sacked as manager of Barcelona after a disappointing 1-0 defeat to Rayo Vallecano in La Liga. It is the 5th defeat in 13 matches this season for the Catalan Giants. Koeman was appointed in August last year, but has always had a strained relationship with current club president Joan Laporta. Former Barcelona player Xavi is the favorite to take over. South Africa's Quinton de Kock has apologized after refusing to take a knee and consequently making himself unavailable for Tuesday's T20 World Cup match against West Indies. In a statement, de Kock insisted that he was not a racist and that his reservations stemmed from the cricket board's last-minute diktat that made kneeling compulsory. He has agreed to participate in the gesture going forward and made himself available for selection.
Are we in the middle of a Himalayan arms race? And if we are, who is winning? This question could define our times. India is arming itself for self-defense, for deterrence. China is arming itself for expansionism, for posturing. These are two completely different objectives. The only thing in common is cutting-edge technology. On Wednesday, India tested its most advanced missile, the Agni-V. It was fired from the Abdul Kalam Island in Odisha. But the tremors would have been felt all the way in Beijing. Let me tell you why. Agni-V is a surface-to-surface missile. It was inducted into the arsenal 3 years back. This missile has a range of 5,000 kilometers. Agni-IV could travel 4,500 kilometers. This one can go another 500. Why is this extra range important? Because now India can strike anywhere in China, the extreme north, the remote east, anywhere. All of China is on Agni-V's radar. Does this make it an intercontinental ballistic missile? Well, not on paper. But for all practical purposes, it is an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile. Agni-V can theoretically strike targets in other continents, like Europe and some parts of Africa. Another big advantage is the accuracy. At 5,000 kilometers, Agni-V is a sure shot. Plus, it's easy to deploy. In military terms, we call it a canistered missile. So you can pack it, you can transport it and deploy it all inside a capsule or a canister. This also means that you can launch the Agni-V from a road or a railway platform. It's quick and easy, but lethal. Because don't forget, this is a nuclear-capable missile. It can carry a 1.5-ton warhead. What is the intent behind this missile test? Is it just a message to China? Does it reflect India's growing military prowess? Here's what the Defense Ministry said, and I'm going to quote from that statement. The successful test of Agni-V is in line with India's stated policy to have credible minimum deterrence that underpins the commitment to no first use. In other words, it's not about attacking, it's about defending. And the timing makes perfect sense. China tested a hypersonic missile in the month of August. And China being China, they did not tell the world about it. Even now, they continue to deny. They say it was not a hypersonic missile, but a space vehicle. How is this technology different from ballistic missiles? For starters, it's much newer. Hypersonic missiles are 21st century technology. Ballistic missiles date back to World War II. But old is not always bad. Hypersonic technology is like a flashy supercar. It's fast, it looks good. But what if you want to go on a trip or go to the supermarket? You'll be much better off with an SUV then. And in this story, ballistic missiles are the SUV. They're more efficient and accurate. So why are countries desperately chasing hypersonic tech? China and Russia have already unlocked it. So has the US. India is also building a hypersonic missile with Russia. It's called the BrahMos 2. A Mark 7 hypersonic missile. Reports say it could be tested by 2025. You could say hypersonic missiles are unpredictable. They travel low on the radar. And more importantly, they can change direction mid-flight, which means they're hard to detect and even harder to intercept. But will they hit the target? That is the key question. The Chinese missile, for example, the one they just tested, missed the target by 32 kilometers. The fact is, hypersonic missiles are untested. But this is an arms race. It doesn't matter if the technology works or not. If your rival has it, you must also have it. Which brings us to the Himalayan arms race. How serious is it? India and China are locked in a fierce border face-off. 18 months, 13 rounds of talks, still no progress. The Chinese side was never interested in a meaningful settlement. They were just stalling. And now we know why. China's showpiece parliament has passed a new border law. What does it say? It says that China's territorial integrity is sacred and inviolable. It sounds simple English, but not in Beijing. Sounds simple enough, rather, but not in Beijing. This is basically a signal to the Chinese military to strengthen their positions, to legitimize incursions, and to reorganize border regions. Does this sound like a country looking for peace? India is urging China to not take unilateral actions. Let me tell you what the Foreign Ministry said. The Chinese border law has provisions to carry out reorganization of districts in border areas. We expect that China will avoid undertaking action under the pretext of this law, which could unilaterally alter the situation in the India-China border areas. Unilateral action, that's a Chinese speciality, by the way. This border standoff is not ending anytime soon. Both India and China have moved rockets to the border. They're test-firing lethal missiles. This is not just any arms race, it's a nuclear arms race. And here's how both countries stack up. China has around 350 nuclear warheads. India has 156. What about missiles? China's newest model is the Dongfeng 31. It has a range of more than 8,000 kilometers. It's a proper intercontinental missile. India's latest model is the Agni-V, and like we told you, it has a range of 5,000 kilometers. India is also developing the next version, the Agni-6. It will have a range of around 8,000 kilometers. Will these missiles remain in their silos, or will they be deployed? Well, that's the question. China's actions make their intention clear. They tested a missile, but they kept it hidden. India, on the other hand, assured the world community of its responsibility. No first use. And the arms race is just one piece of the puzzle. The other is gaining strategic depth, strengthening defense partnerships, expanding your military footprint. And this is where India may have some catching up to do with China, because China is on overdrive. It is projecting its power far beyond the mainland. How are they doing it? Through overseas military bases. China has 3 of them already: a support base in Djibouti, a signals intelligence facility in Myanmar, and a military base in eastern Tajikistan. Now they're adding a 4th one to the list. Another military base in Tajikistan. It's yet to be built, but the approval has been granted. The Tajik parliament has given its nod. They say they want a Chinese base to counter security threats from Afghanistan. Where will this base be built? Right on the border with Afghanistan, at a remote village in the country's Gorno-Badakhshan province. This base would be owned by a Tajik defense group, but it will be built with Chinese funding. At what cost? $10 million to start with, plus all the tolls and trappings of Chinese money. What will this military base be used for? The exact purpose has not been declared, but Tajik lawmakers say it would carry out policing duties focused on combating organized crime. It's also going to have a quote-unquote special equipment for the Interpol information system. And this special equipment, the system, will be installed by China. We do hope it works. In a separate development, the Tajik government has also offered full control of the pre-existing Chinese military base to Beijing. Now this base, the older base, is located near the Wakhan corridor, the one that lies north of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Tajikistan has granted absolute autonomy to China for this military base. And that's not all. China will never have to pay a rent for this base. Tajikistan has also waived off any future rent for this facility. Why would they do such a thing? To get more military aid from China, apparently. At least that's what the Chinese embassy has been told. Well, rent or no rent, this development is very significant. China is building a new military base in Tajikistan and it has gained full control of another. What does it show? It shows China's growing clout in Central Asia, a region so far considered Russia's turf. Central Asia is Moscow's playground. It was once an essential part of the Soviet Union. Countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan, they were all part of the USSR. Then the Soviet Union disintegrated. Moscow took the role of a security guarantor. And that's how it's been for 3 decades. But now China is changing the landscape. It has made rapid inroads with military, transport, economic and political links. China has a growing presence in every Central Asian country. All of them receive military aid from China. All of them are part of the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. China is the largest trading partner of all 5 of these countries. Their collective bilateral trade touches $50 billion. If we talk about infrastructure, China has invested $40 billion in this region since 2014. 40 billion, 40. If we talk about security partnerships, China carries out military drills with all Central Asian states. Where does that leave Russia? It has a presence for sure, but its influence is waning. Let me give you just one parameter to drive home this point. In the 1990s, total bilateral trade stood at $110 billion. Russia and these countries, $110 billion. Today it stands at $18.6 billion. You see the drop? That is Russia's story in Central Asia. Gas exports from Russia from this region have dropped 60% since 2009. Most of the Central Asian pipelines are now carrying reserves to China. Then we have China's Belt and Road Initiative, Xi Jinping's vanity project plus world domination plan. The BRI was conceived around the same time as another plan, another project, the Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU. The BRI has left this Russian project far, far behind. Today, this Russian plan, the EAEU, has just 5 members. The BRI has more than 100. And Central Asian nations are an integral part of the Belt and Road. In June 2020, the Russian foreign minister even skipped a BRI conference. It was seen as Moscow's protest to China's BRI expansionism. Then we come to education. It's a soft power tool. It's very important. There was a time when parents in Central Asia sent their children to Moscow for higher education. Today, they send them to China. It has become an increasingly popular destination for colleges and universities. And I could give you many more examples, but you get the point. China is edging Russia out. China is winning the great game in Central Asia. Its gains may look small at the moment, but the geopolitical impact they will have would be profound. So Russia should be on alert if it isn't already. Vladimir Putin's ice cream buddy may leave him on thin ice in his own backyard. Islamabad, meanwhile, is rejoicing. It has received a generous gift from Riyadh, a $3 billion cash deposit to Pakistan's central bank. Imran Khan was elated, but his joy was short-lived. He has extremists holding his country hostage. It's not a pretty sight or a situation anyone would envy. So we'll start with a gift. The Saudi Fund for Development has deposited $3 billion in the State Bank of Pakistan. And that's not all. It has also issued a directive to finance petroleum products worth $1.2 billion for the next 1 year. So this is $4.2 billion in all in Saudi aid to Pakistan. This is much needed respite for the Pakistani government, which is in the throes of deep financial crisis, the biggest in their history. Pakistan's gross external financing requirement stands at $51.6 billion. What does that mean? In simple English, it means Pakistan needs $51.6 billion over the next 2 years to fulfill its basic needs. Needless to say, Pakistan does not have that kind of money. It is buried under debt. Pakistan owes $122 billion in foreign debt and liabilities. $122 billion. That's 40% of the country's total GDP. Adding to Pakistan's woes is its free-falling currency. It's losing ground every day. Last we checked, it stood at 173 rupees against the dollar. Pakistani rupees. So at a time like this, the aid from Saudi Arabia is a lifeline. Imran Khan could not hide his excitement. He posted this on Twitter. Allow me to quote, "I'm grateful to His Excellency Prince Mohammed bin Salman for helping Pakistan through a $3 billion deposit. Saudi Arabia has always helped Pakistan in difficult times, including the current challenge of rising world prices of essential commodities." It's a great gesture indeed. But how did it come about? Because last we checked, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan were on a break. You would remember what happened last year. Pakistan's foreign minister, the one and only Shah Mahmood Qureshi, threatened that they would quit the OIC if Saudi Arabia does not convene a meeting on Kashmir. Saudi Arabia did not convene that meeting, but they responded to Pakistan by asking them to return $2 billion from a loan that they had granted earlier. Pakistan did not have that money. They had to borrow the money from China to repay the Saudis. That's how bad it became. Now, the Pakistan Prime Minister says the Saudis have always been there for his country. It's very interesting. Reports say the reset happened during Imran Khan's recent visit to Saudi Arabia. He went there with the army chief. He met the Crown Prince and evidently got more than rice bags this time. Unfortunately for him, money or the lack of it is just one part of his problem. He also has extremists to deal with. For almost a week now, Islamists have kept Pakistan on the edge. Members of the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, or the TLP, have hit the streets across the country. They've brought several cities to a standstill. Why are these people protesting? They want their leader to be released. This man, Saad Rizvi, he has been in detention since April. He wants Islamabad to expel the French ambassador. Why? Because France allowed depictions of the Prophet in Charlie Hebdo. So this leader, Saad Rizvi, leader of a banned Islamist outfit, wants the government of Pakistan to expel the French ambassador. For a change, Pakistan did the right thing. They put the man behind bars. But this led to violence. TLP supporters went on a rampage across the country. Islamabad outlawed the party. They banned it. The protest died down. That was 6 months ago. 6 months on, the decision does not seem to have had the intended effect. The protests are back. Thousands are out on the streets. In Lahore, in Karachi, in Rawalpindi, Multan, Peshawar, in almost every major city in the country. The violence has exploded. At least 15 people have died. More than 260 have been injured. Even policemen are not being spared. On Wednesday, 3 policemen were killed in Lahore after TLP supporters opened fire on them. 2 demonstrators also died in the ensuing shootout. Now, the protesters are marching towards the capital. They're heading to Islamabad by the thousands, looking to turn the city into a battlefield. Saudi money may not be enough to douse their anger. We now move to a story from the United States. The country has issued its first Gender X passport, which means the passport holder has not been identified as a male or a female. It's Gender X. Now, this is a milestone for Washington. But the United States is not the first country to allow its citizens to declare themselves as non-binary or the third gender on their passport. At least 15 countries, including India, already have this provision. In India, you can opt for the Gender X. The US, in fact, is a late entrant to this inclusive passport club. Here's a report.
I'm an intersex person, and I had rights as such.
Sex or gender would once be a characteristic a person is born with. Today, it is a social construct. The definition of gender is changing. Also changing with it is our world.
Well, this is my passport, which I got this morning. It's the first a U.S. passport with the X marker, which is over here. It's kind of unbelievable.
The United States has issued its first Gender X passport. The Gender X passport means the holder does not identify themselves as male or female. 63-year-old Zim, for example, born with ambiguous physical sexual characteristics. Zim was raised a boy and had several surgeries to appear fully male. Nothing worked, so Zim went on to serve in the U.S. Navy as a male, then eventually identify themselves as intersex. Today, Zim prefers a gender-neutral pronoun, hence the they.
And this is a reminder to never give up. Don't give up on myself. I have things to do.
Zim is the first U.S. Gender X passport holder. Getting hold of this booklet was not easy. Zim did not want to lie about their gender, and the U.S. State Department simply wouldn't issue a passport without either male or female written under the gender category. What did Zim do?
I worked a long time to get this one. 6 years and a day through the federal court system.
They say all's well that ends well. Zim can now travel abroad and spread the message of inclusivity, one immigration gate at a time. That said, the United States has been quite a late entrant in the Gender X passport club. 15 countries already allow its citizens to declare themselves as non-binary or third gender on their passports. The Netherlands started this change in 2018. Amsterdam gave 57-year-old Leon Zegers the world's first gender-neutral passport. Several other countries followed suit. The list includes Argentina, Austria, Australia, Canada, Colombia, Denmark, Germany, Iceland, India, Ireland, Malta, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Nepal, and Pakistan. In India, a person can get an X status on the passport by simply presenting the required medical certificates. Last year, the Netherlands announced that it would do away with gender markers altogether. For now, this letter X in passports is changing the way we look at the world. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
We're counting down to the COP26 summit. Climate change is all the rage. It's the new cool thing, t-shirts with climate change, songs about climate change, it's everywhere. But how nuanced is this conversation? Do we understand real climate action? Take governments, for example. They have a new pet project. It's called net zero emissions. What does that mean? What you produce must be equal to what you remove. We're talking about greenhouse gases here. If you produce 10 tons of carbon dioxide, you must also remove 10 tons of carbon dioxide. It's called net zero emissions. How can you achieve this? Well, there are many ways. You can grow more forests, you can cut down emissions, you can use green technology. All of these strategies lead to net zero. The Western world loves it. It gives the impression that they're actually doing something about it. The US, Britain, Australia, the European Union, they've all set the same deadline, net zero by 2050. That's what they say. They want other countries to do the same. Reach net zero by around 2050 or 2060. But India is not playing ball. Here's what the Environment Secretary had to say. And I'm quoting this. It is how much carbon you're going to put in the atmosphere before reaching net zero that is more important. That's India's Environment Secretary, and he's right. Net zero targets are becoming an excuse. As one scientist put it, burn now, pay later. This is what the West is doing. They're still emitting greenhouse gases. They're still cutting down forests. And if you question them, they talk about their net zero targets. But the fact is, climate change is already here. It's not going to wait another 30 years. Plus, carbon removal does not happen in real time. Let me show you what the folks at Greenpeace say. And I'm quoting again, net zero pledges are being released now on a nearly daily basis. They assume that emissions from burning coal can be compensated in real time by protecting a forest or planting trees. ignoring the fact that plants need time to grow whilst cutting fossil fuel emissions has immediate results. Do you see the problem now? The West does not have a long-term solution. They're banking on money and technology, not to cut emissions, but to remove the greenhouse gases they produce. Well, it's a good plan, but it's far from perfect. Our goal must be to cut all emissions, not to plant a tree for every piece of coal we burn. It won't work that way. That's a license to keep using fossil fuel. So what is India proposing here? More focus on the process. India wants to reduce the emissions intensity of its economy. By 2016, a 24% dip was reported. The final target is 35% by 2030. And to make this happen, you need climate financing. We're talking about a lot of money. India needs to spend $2.5 trillion to meet these targets, $2.5 trillion. Where will all of this money come from? The Western nations can afford to splurge on climate change. Countries like India cannot, not at the moment. Their primary commitment is towards the people. So what's the middle ground? Well, we already have one. It was agreed upon at the Rio summit in 1992. Common but differentiated responsibility. You see, emissions do not disappear. Carbon dioxide can stay in the atmosphere for centuries, which means the pollution you see today is probably a few centuries old. This is called historical emissions. And here's how each country stacks up on historical emissions. The US has 28.8%, China 9%, Russia 8%, Germany 7%, Britain 5.8%, India 2.4%. North America and Europe began their industrial revolution in 1760. That's the 18th century. What about India? The 20th century. The Western world had a head start of 140 years. That's 140 more years of pollution. But the finish line is apparently the same for everyone, 2050 or 2060. How is this even fair? Western countries became rich by polluting the world. Now they're preventing other nations like India, from doing the same, preaching them. I understand that climate change is a global problem. Everyone has to work towards it. But we must identify the perpetrators and the victims. At COP26, the West must loosen the purse strings. Climate action must be funded by the climate criminals. And we are going to start the next story by listening in to what Iran's president, the new president, Ibrahim Raisi, told the United Nations General Assembly in September.
Nuclear weapons have no place in our defense doctrine and deterrence policy. Nuclear weapons have no place in our defense doctrine and deterrence policy.
This was Raisi telling the whole world that Iran is not pursuing nuclear weapons. Like I mentioned, Raisi was speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, and this was in the month of September. It's October now, and Iran is already taking steps towards returning to the nuclear deal. Tehran says it will return to nuclear talks before the end of November. This is what Iran's nuclear negotiator Ali Bagheri Kani has tweeted. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth on this deal, and a lot of you may be wondering why this is such a big deal. So first, we'll quickly run you through what's been happening. The nuclear deal was signed in 2015. On one side was Iran, on the other was China, Germany, France, Russia, United States and the United Kingdom. They call themselves the P5+1, the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council plus Germany. And the deal was called the JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program. The West agreed to lift sanctions. That was the deal, in simple words, and it worked for both sides. Then Donald Trump entered the White House. In 2018, the United States unilaterally pulled out of the deal. Trump slapped sanctions on Iran. He exercised what his administration called maximum pressure. Tehran fired back by scaling up its nuclear capabilities. Now the Trump era is over. Joe Biden is in the White House. He was the vice president when then President Barack Obama negotiated the nuclear deal with Iran. Much like his other foreign policies, with Iran too, Biden is going the Obama way. He has expressed the desire to return to the talking table. He has urged Iran to do the same. Progress was made in early 2021. 6 rounds of talks were held in Vienna. The talks were then suspended in June. That's when Iran held elections. Then came a 5-month hiatus. Earlier this month, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken issued a warning to Tehran. He said the window for diplomacy is closing. So Iran is now extending an olive branch. Why is all of this important? Why is there so much hype around this deal? It's because this deal is the best bet for avoiding another war in West Asia. It's the best bet for ensuring uninterrupted transport of oil in the Persian Gulf. You see, without this deal, Iran could end up with a nuclear weapon. And that would set off a chain reaction. Israel is already on the front foot. Here's what Israel's Foreign Minister Yair Lapid said earlier this month. And I have the quote with me. He says Israel reserves the right to act at any given moment in any way. That is not only our right, it is also our responsibility. Israel and Iran are sworn enemies. An Iranian nuke will be a major provocation. A military conflict will be costly for all sides. Plus, it will disrupt global oil supplies. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. This is where the bulk of the oil passes from. And we're talking about more than 18 million barrels of oil per day. Imagine the chaos if this is disrupted. And then we'll have another nuclear arms race. The Saudi crown prince has made it very, very clear, if Iran develops a nuclear bomb, Saudi Arabia will too. So this is a recipe for disaster. Restricting Iran's nuclear capabilities is disaster prevention. Next question. Will Iran sign the deal again? Will it open its nuclear facilities for inspection? Will it agree to reduce the stockpiles of enriched uranium? It won't be easy. And we have America to blame for this. Americans walked out of the deal under Trump. Now there's a predictable president in the White House. But Iran has a new leadership too. They have a new president, a hardliner called Ibrahim Raisi. He will play hardball. He'll have a longer list of demands. And he may be justified in doing so. His country stuck to the deal, you see. The Americans broke it. And the others played mute spectators. Russia, China, Germany, France, Britain. They could do nothing except say that they remained committed. That doesn't really count for very much. So Tehran is now asking for more. It wants an assurance from America that the US will not quit the deal again. It wants an assurance from the Europeans too, that in case the United States walks away, Europe will do more to keep the deal alive. From where I sit, it's a fair bargain. Here's what Iran's Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian said not very long ago. And I'm quoting again, America's return to the deal does not matter to us. What is important is that the outcome of talks be in Iran's favor. So here's the gist. Negotiations are not going to be easy, but cracking a deal won't be too hard either. Raisi may be a hardliner, but he's under pressure from Iran's ally Russia to return to the talks. For Iran, this nuclear deal means global acceptance. It means fewer sanctions. They need to revive their economy, and they need it desperately. For West Asia and the world, the Iran nuclear deal means peace, or the absence of war at least. And for India, this deal means diversification of oil imports. So really, it's a win-win for all sides. The sooner the parties get talking, the better. In France, President Emmanuel Macron is a confused man. He wants to be tough on radical Islam, but he doesn't know how to do it. He wants to call himself a centrist, but he doesn't want to lose the right-wing vote. The result is this, a confused and problematic policy. Macron is shutting down mosques in the country. His latest crackdown is in the city of Alons. An Islamic school and a mosque have been shut. Why? Because of radical Islamic leanings. The French Interior Minister says the sermons were cultivating hatred towards France. And he plans to shut 7 more mosques by the end of this year. Again, for the same reason, radical Islamic leanings. And this has become Macron's go-to policy. You suspect a problem, you shut it down completely. Take a look at his track record. 13 Muslim associations shut, 92 mosques closed, and 36,000 foreigners stripped of their residence permits. On what grounds? Threat to public life. That's what the French government says. Now, nobody is defending radical Islam. Nobody is against counter-terrorism operations. And France has a problem that must be dealt with. But President Macron's policy is not about terrorism, it seems. It looks like he's trying to single out a religion, in this case Islam. His policies do not target radicalization, they target Islamic symbols, like the burqa or mosques. And these policies have real consequences. Let me show you some numbers. In 2019, there were 154 attacks on French Muslims. In 2020, 253. That's a 53% jump, and that too in the middle of lockdowns. Clearly, Macron's policy has made French Muslims a target. The question is, why is he doing this? Emmanuel Macron was a centrist darling, the savior of the liberal world order. When did he become the villain? When he started losing public support. Macron is up for re-election next year, remember, and his chances do not look good. Both his predecessors failed to win a second term, plus the French electorate is shifting to the right. Macron's centrism is out of touch. So what does he do? Shift to the right himself. President Macron is playing to the gallery. He's attacking Islamic symbols, shutting down mosques. It may help him win the election, may. But what about the French society? Can it heal from these divisions? France has a total population of 67 million people. 5 million of them are Muslims. Some of them came as refugees. Others migrated for better opportunities. Whatever the reason, they're now French citizens. But Macron's policies treat them as suspects. Every Muslim becomes a target for radicalization. Every mosque becomes a hub of extremism. This is not the solution to Islamist terror. This will only alienate French Muslims further. And the worrying part is, ordinary French people are buying this narrative. Let me show you the findings of a new poll in France. 61% people believe Muslims could completely replace white Christians. 27% people are certain, and I'm quoting, they're certain that this is going to happen. Just to remind you, Muslims make up less than 8% of France's population. This so-called replacement theory is a far-right conspiracy. It's a dog whistle. And under Emmanuel Macron, it's being mainstreamed. So what can the president do? For starters, abandon the purge. Go to the root of radicalization. Find out why young French Muslims feel left out or angry. And secondly, stop attacking symbols. Wearing of a burqa may not be a sign of radicalization. Neither is attending an Islamic school. Remember, we are not talking about battle-hardened terrorists here. We're talking about French citizens. It's not a war, it's a battle of minds. Macron will do well to read his own country's history. How did a nation that pioneered liberal democracy end up spreading hate? The French president has a choice here: win the election or save the republic. Unfortunately, there is no centrist choice here. And we'll end tonight's show with a story from Denmark. The country is caught in a Minkgate, a scandal involving minks. In 2020, Denmark culled some 15 million minks over fears of the Wuhan virus. The move was illegal. So a probe committee has been set up to look into the matter. Now, text messages from the Prime Minister's phone regarding this mink culling have also disappeared. What happened to them? Our next story tells you.
The story of the Minkgate begins in 2020. The Wuhan virus was unleashing horror in the world. There was fear and zero clarity. Could the virus jump from humans to animals and back to humans from animals? There was no convincing answer. In Denmark, cases were on a steep rise when workers in mink farms started falling sick. Soon, a new Wuhan virus strain was found in mink farms. Scientists said the variant could have spread from minks to humans. That spelled the death sentence for the furry creatures. Denmark, Europe's largest producer of mink wool, decided to cull its entire mink population. Some 15 million of these creatures were killed, buried, then dug up only to be exhumed. Such was the fear of the Wuhan virus that even dead minks were seen as possible threats. But was the threat of the virus reason enough to cull nearly 15 million minks? The Danish parliament is now trying to find out, but there is one problem. The probe committee is not being able to access text messages sent by Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. Why? Because the messages have been deleted. The Prime Minister says the deletion is not specific to messages regarding the minks. She claims all messages from her phone are automatically deleted after 30 days. Apparently, she has been advised to do so for security reasons. Now, this is no small scandal. The culling of minks was illegal. Danish law does not support killing of healthy animals. So far, the government has not been able to sell their decision. The country's food minister has had to step down, and the spotlight now is on the Prime Minister. It is imperative that the probe team gets access to her phone. That's the only way to find out who knew what, who said what, and who did what. The Minkgate has become the biggest scandal in recent Danish history. Some reports say the Prime Minister may be impeached. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
And that's it, you got it. That's the slow. Yeah. Tricky business. Yeah. Oh my god, I don't know. There you go.
Right, we're getting marked out of 10.
You're going to cheers.
Perfect. We're going to be in there. There you go.